Hi, in the second part of this video, we're going to take a look at what's called getters and setters. Now, as you saw in the client, I had initialized 2.4 to width and I had initialized height as 3.1. Now, the user can as easily initialize the height to minus 3.1, which is obviously an invalid value. When you display the area of this rectangle as r.area, but because area is a method with round brackets, it will display a negative area, which should not be allowed. So to tackle this, we add a keyword private in front of the instance variables, and when we do that, the client shows an error because anything that's private can only be accessed within the class definition, not outside. So there is no way the client can see these instance variables. So to access these instance variables, we need to create a public method which returns the width, and similarly a public method that returns the height. Of course, you don't have to do that for every instance variable, only for those instance variables that you want the client to be able to read. When you do this, instead of displaying the values, you can display the outcome of the getter invocation, and you can see that no longer is there an error on line numbers 9 and 10. So getters return the value of the instance variable. That's what a getter does. But the client also wants to assign a value 2.4 or minus 3.1 to the instance variable width or height. So what setters do is assign a value to the instance variable. So they have to be public because they should be able to be called from the client. They don't return anything, but they try to assign a value to the width instance variable in this case. So since I need to assign a value, that value must be passed to the setter. So here we say W. Now if I say width becomes W, that's not going to help me because that W could be negative. So I need to do some kind of check on that value W before I assign it to width. So I check if W is less than 0, I cannot assign a negative value to width, so width should become 0. Otherwise, which means W was more than or equal to 0, yes, that's acceptable, and width becomes W. Similarly, public void set height to some variable height, h, and we check if h is less than 0, height becomes 0, and otherwise height becomes h because h is more than equal to 0. Now you can do the same thing in many ways. So one thing you can do is you can assign h, you can copy h into height. So if h is negative, you can overwrite it. That's another way of doing the exact same thing. You can also say height becomes math.max. So whatever is the higher between 0 and h. So if h is negative, 0 is more than h and the maximum is 0. If h is not negative, then higher between 0 and h is h. My point being, there are many ways to do the same thing, so don't get fixated that this is the photo of the code that I require. No. So that's your setter. Now, instead of assigning a value directly, you're going to call the set methods and assign 2.4, and over here set the height to minus 3.1. When I run this, it says width is 0, height is 0.0. How did that happen? Because when I tried to assign minus 3.1 to the height, that value minus 3.1 was passed as h. Because that value minus 3.1 is less than 0, height instance variable becomes 0. So you can see that the values can be validated through the use of getters and setters. And that's it for this short video.